Hello, family. I'm Janaya Future Khan, and this is Dark Woke. Just before we hit it, I want to say thank you to all the listeners out there, and a special shout out to the supporters who make this show possible. It truly means the world to me. If you'd like to become a member, our Patreon is linked in the episode right up below. Hello, family. We're still the only ones talking about race. Corey looked, I looked. I don't know how this is happening, but I also know exactly how this is happening. And it's because we've made it so much bigger than it is. But at the same time, right, we've blown it out of proportions in our mind, but then we ignore it in society. That's so weird. We're being so weird about it. But you know who's not? Us. Okay, no, that's not true. We're like literally like, hey, let's find and make an entirely new way to approach this. But it actually makes sense because in this episode, we're sort of grappling with what that might look like. We've talked about a Black sensibility. We talked about the parallels between Reconstruction then and now, and how that relates to even the Super Bowl, right? And this quote unquote immigration crisis, but it's actually not an immigration crisis. Okay. It is manufactured, to be clear. It is a manufactured crisis. But it very much is a red herring, a racist red herring being dangled in front of Americans, and they are chomping at the bit for it more than I'd like. But that doesn't explain what's happening on our side. And by our side, I mean anyone that is not an avowed racist, GOP bootlicker, right? Or like a dick riding MAGA glazer, because that's what they are. No thoughts in their head. And if we needed proof, not that we did, but if we needed proof on anything that I said about the fact that they can't generate culture, they don't know culture, they have no sense of it, even though they have all the money in the world and they have literally a full sweep, right? They've got all the power. Congress is theirs the entirety. Supreme Court, the administration. They could have done any number of things for their little halftime show. And that was the best that they could do. And that's what we have to realize. That's the best that they can do. Which means that owning the culture doesn't mean that they're good contributors of it. That matters because our art, our work, our thoughts, they still will break through, but they have to be substantive. And right now, we're all serving each other and being served nothing burgers. It's all this, they did it, and it's this, and we're getting so much certainty. What I'm doing is I'm synthesizing some of the scaffolding that we've put together in the past several episodes, so that I can fold this into this neatly, because we're in play space. We're going to try to figure out, unpack a little more on this Black sensibility. We're going to talk about some experiences that I've had that I'm trying to translate because we are coming up with 21st century models of organizing. Language doesn't mean what it used to mean. It also shouldn't. We're the first generation to have the internet, as you know. And what have we done? My God, what have we done? What have we become? I found one slice of peace on the internet, okay? It was animal videos. And today, when I innocently opened up my phone to try to find some sort of animal story that made me feel like humanity and this planet was 1000% worth saving and dying for even, I got fed an AI slop video of a horse on skis. I don't want to live in a world like that. A horse on skis, like that's not even funny. It didn't even look funny. I'm furious about that. I don't like this opening either, Corey. What's wrong with me? Am I doing okay?
Yeah, I mean,
okay. Cut out the horse thing. Cut out the AI slop thing. Cut it out.
AI slop horse thing. Got it.
Okay, that's where I fucked up. I'm Gabby now.
Yeah, you're belaboring.
I'm gabbing. Yeah, because we were and I'm nixing it. So yeah. Fuck that AI joke, whatever the fuck.
Got it.
Right before that, I was saying the scaffolding. I was saying, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So within that, right, new tools, we need new language, new approaches. We've talked about critical connections being more important than critical mass because our first thing is going out into the streets. People power is only powerful when it's doing something, right? When it's useful. I love the spiritual correctiveness of being on a protest line. There's nothing like it, but we're wasting our resources because our resources are finite. Their resources are long and their resources don't end. Our resources are the most precious and the most necessary, which is people. But the energy of people and the attention and the capacity of people is finite. So what if we approach this from human potential, right? Because that's what I'm interested in. And what if we approach the concept of race from the lens of human potential? Hear me out, because we talked about Black sensibility, but I was like, when you go through it, when you really start to go through the Black American experience, it's breathtaking that they are the way that they are. Like, I guess in a way I'm falling in love with the Black experience again, because it wasn't the Black experience I fell out of love with. It was the hurt that came with showing that to the world and the rejection that came with that, because it didn't make any sense to me. And it might never make sense because race and racism is fucking absolutely illogical, right? Again, if we came across a planet and the planet was identical to ours, but it was cows. It was cows instead of people. And they literally just cows teaching, cows driving buses, right? Cows being chefs, just cows. And upon discovering that the cows had actually divvied up their society and had wars because of the color of their fur, we'd be like, that is the stupidest fucking thing in the world. Who would do that? This is why they're cows. And yet somehow we have decided that skin color is a determinant of one's abilities, one's thoughts, one's sensibilities. And it's like, I don't know how dumb that is. I love being a Black person so much, but it's because of the Black sensibility first and foremost. I mean, if I was I should be more chocolate. I'll never get over the fact that I'm a light bright. Never. But it's the Black sensibility that's what's been cultivated out of racism, out of chattel slavery, out of Jim Crow, right? Out of the constant betrayals. It's an ability to see the duality in people, the hard and the easy, the good and the bad, and to say, this is what life is. And still pursuing something more, something better matters. Now, I've been thinking, because we destroyed the race and class thing, but there's a new designation that I want to hit. So we're about to jump into some anecdotes, and we're mainly going to be talking about the Black sensibility thing today. Because what I do think is important is from that Kelly Osbourne thing, and thank you, Corey, for because Corey is the resident pop culture expert. I think it's a useful thing to go over past experiences back when one could dominate the entire discourse of the internet for a day. But I think to go through some of them and unpack where we went wrong, because with Kelly Osbourne, again, there was, we can't say it. But it wasn't what she said that was offensive. It was the truth of it, right? What did Kelly Osbourne say? He's like, well, Mr. Trump, who's going to clean your toilets? It was the truth. It should be. It ought to be the truth that offends us. But what actually offended people there and offended everybody else was her saying it out loud, right? We never got to correct and think of the way to say that in the way it ought to be said, or in, from the place it was meant, because we were more invested in punishment. Okay. What do I mean? So there's going to be a couple of, now that we've made some sense, I'm going to hit you with some anecdotes, and some examples, and we're going to take it from there. Right. But we're kind of out there. Okay. But so I thought instead of being deranged, which is where, I want to go, I want to unpack Kid Rock calling Jay-Z a diversity hire. I want to unpack this because DEI was something that was treated as a joke. I treated it, the loss of DEI, the rolling back of DEI, I treated it as a joke and not as in, oh, this doesn't have more insidious implications. I just didn't go there at all. I didn't want to go there. Because it felt so heavy. And so it was just easier to avoid it and then to go straight to the jokes, right? And that's not me actually being in a Black sensibility, because a Black sensibility understands the both end, right? I didn't want to address this. So I thought this was a good place to start. So in yesterday's episode, Kid Rock, who is honestly ought to be completely irrelevant, like literally obsolete. But, he's around. I suppose for the same reasons the measles are back. But anyway, he's around and he's big on the right. He's one of their only culture warriors. But he referenced Jay-Z. He's talking about the Super Bowl on Fox News. And Jay-Z comes up. And I just want you to know that Jay-Z's business acumen, how he approaches his understanding of Black liberation, and it's not just his, it's shared by many Black people. And I can tell you, I actually figured out when that happened, which is nuts. But I wanted to unpack that a little bit more because I think I was like, oh, this is one of those cultural moments that we take for granted because it's like, well, it's Kid Rock and he's talking about Jay-Z's a billionaire, Jay-Z's done so better. No. Let's actually unpack it. So for one, nothing that Kid Rock represents is rock at all, because real rock is anti-authoritarian. You're literally sitting with fascists, you fucking loser, wash your hair. It's so thin. It's so thin. The grease just shines through the fucking camera. But anyway, he calls Jay-Z a diversity. He's like, oh, I'm not saying he didn't do good. I'm not saying anything like that. Like, he's obviously been successful, but I do feel it was like a bit of a diversity hire. What is he actually saying in that, right? I think he's a diversity hire, as in he got brought in because he's Black. Ask yourself, and let's just be honest, right? How many times that sentiment has come up in your life, right? By people around you, in a room, in an office, mainly, right? This has been in what? Professional spaces, offices. But when it first comes up, it's usually in school. And when it's debated about, it's usually debated about in school. And our response in the past has been, it's white women who get it mostly, which is true. But again, it's responding defensively. And I don't believe that we have to be defensive about any of this anymore at all. One of the most transformative experiences of my life recently was, I will tell you all about the Illuminati thing one day. But I watched, and it's partly what's influenced my new approach. I watched Dr. Gates. So this is Henry Louis Gates Jr., right? And we had just had dinner, and very intimate because there were a lot of small dinners everywhere. So we had one-on-one conversations enough that I got a sense of the man. So it's not just my absorption of his works and everything else, but mainly it was my watching him say matter-of-factly, what he believed to be true. And he's saying it in a room with some of the world's most powerful, influential people, some of the richest, most well-known. And what he's talking about is race. And what he's talking about is how the realities of right now are directly informed by race. But again, he's not pulling out this, that, that's that, right? Because he doesn't need to, because he is the paramount, penultimate Black American record. Not only is he a historian, a celebrated, author emeritus, at professor emeritus at, like Harvard, he's just, it's that it was in that room, in that space. And I'm using room as it wasn't literally a room. But in that space, it was a large outdoor space. He didn't have to because his expertise was respected. Even in a room, right, where people would say, that person's like this person's like that. Because in those spaces, there is some kind of reverence or understanding for expertise. Whether they cared is a different matter. But here in regular America land, we have no respect for expertise, and we've treated race as a matter of opinion and emotion, as opposed to just a reality, an irrefutable truth that is integral to understanding or doing anything meaningful when it comes to change in America, because it is the social science. But we don't treat it like it matters. It would be every time that we approach social justice without attempting to wrestle or tackle or include specifically anti-Black racism. Again, the Negro problem is actually the solution requires engagement with the fucking problem, because the Negro problem isn't the problem of Black people. It is the sole reason for why we have not seen any change since Black people have made changes in America with zero power. They were that compelling, that influential, singularly responsible for, at the time, well, they were Republicans at the time, but Lincoln and all them winning the war. They needed their participation, and they had the wherewithal to say, we want these things and we demand these things for freed Black people, as in we're here in the North and slavery's already been abolished here and off we go. Right? And also that those same rights and protections would be applied to those who would be freed as a result of their actions, which meant that they also cared about those Black folks still enslaved that they did not know, had no relation to, likely, right? Because we're talking about 4 million fucking people here, collectively. The number of enslaved African peoples outnumbered those white people who were just living their lives, many of whom were getting very wealthy off of this industry. I want to remind you again, not only would there be slavery represented the verse heritable wealth. There was no heritable wealth in America before then, because there was no wealth substantial enough to make that kind of fucking difference. It was slavery. So again, race capital, but we destroyed the Why am I bringing this up? Because I want us to think about this in a different way. I'm going to ask you about some school experiences, then I'm going to tell you about a study. I've been going back. By the way, we'll talk about it another time, but because we're not, everything that we're grappling with or dealing with beyond the internet is what everybody was. And the dynamics were the same. They're just more concentrated. Like I came across I can't say it was excellent, but I loved that it was written, and I loved that the title's excellent. I came across this random article, but there's a blog essentially written in 1970 that's called The Tyranny of Structurelessness. And it's this woman who's talking about, I wish I remember her name, but we're going to talk about it because, first of all, with that title, I had to be reading this shit. But second of all, it's the same thing that we're struggling with here on our side, which is this sort of lie of non-hierarchical organizing as virtuous. And in the structurelessness, we've allowed the worst actors to use their identity as a bludgeon. So what I appreciate about the tyranny of structurelessness, by the way, she's kind of making a different argument, but it's kind of the same. She's talking about how the most charismatic people who aren't necessarily the best suited for the work, when you don't have a structured, organizing body or movement, you're going to get bad actors, who are sort of invested in maintaining that structurelessness because they benefit most from it, right? If I'm charismatic and I'm loud and and now I'll update it for today. If I'm charismatic and loud, and now I do that by wielding my identity in the way that is most useful to me, right? That gives me the most attention, that gives me the most, investment, that gives me the most. That's the work. And we've sort of, and that's part of the, if we bring it back to yesterday's episode, that's part of the consumption component, right? I can think of a few, but probably the most successful. I'm going to just do better at naming names because I think not naming names is not helping. But I actually want to be clear that unless I say vociferously, this person is this and this is the problem, I'm not blaming this person or anybody that I name for the conditions, nor am I actually blaming or indicting them for maneuvering advantageously around them because they didn't create these conditions. I do think we have to consider what happens when we're all enabling them. But what yesterday I think I made a reference. So like Alok is somebody I don't have any problem with. We're casually friends, but. If you ask me about Alok's strategy in their relation to the comedy, it was very much, if you buy this ticket, you support trans rights. Not only does that pigeonhole one as an artist in that, which nobody tells us this stuff, we should be mindful of. And it's okay to be if you want to be and you know how to do it. But I don't know that we always know. Because this is what we've told is our capital, the only capital we're supposed to have. Although that doesn't apply to Alok. Alok comes from a good amount of money and all that other stuff. But the point is, we made it synonymous. If you buy tickets to this, you support this. If you go here, which is very different than, say, in Palestine, where we actually should be bolstering a Palestinian economy. But here it really is, again, the hyper-individualism. But to be clear, if we could stop fucking like throwing money at the Trevor Project, nobody even knows what the fuck that is. What a helpline? Can we stop? Okay, sorry. So let me locate us back, okay? But we go to consumption and we think, okay, capital and this is the way. And definitely we need to like invest and champion the people whose work we believe in and we know matters, but that's not the same thing, right? One is vested interest that is based on a body of work. And one is saying, if you support this, then you buy this. That's the same thing. It's not. It's actually not. And we have to be really mindful of that because it sort of pigeonholes on one end and on the other end, it kind of is like, well, that was the work. So the question is not if it's not mass mobilization, it's not somebody buying a ticket. What is the work now? Right? Fantastic. That's a great question. First, let me locate us back into this point I was making, right? The diversity hire. Kid Rock is essentially calling Jay-Z, who can literally, you know what? We don't even get to talk about Jay-Z's story, okay? There's a point that I didn't finish, and I'm just making a note to finish it. Sorry, which is that I can tell you exactly when, for many Black men in America, and for Black men, period, they are very, very energetic and enthusiastic and eager about Black economy as liberation. That actually happened if you study the Reconstruction era, which I'm in the process of doing, so I would not call myself an expert yet by any means. But boy, can I remember things and apply them well. Post Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, right? Booker T. Washington comes in and says, politics? You niggas got free and was like, let me run for office? No, go open up a shop. Go buy a farm, right? And again, the reason why those options were possible was because Black folks who were formerly enslaved had the wherewithal to say, oh no, you're not just tossing us aside. Now, no, we're here. We've been here for 400 fucking years. We built this place. We're why you have wealth. We now deserve to have the same access to self-determine as anybody else. That means that we get the right to vote. That means that we get the right to buy land. That means the right. So Booker T wasn't wrong. But why it happened? Because, well, the murder and the rape and the maiming and the lynching and the killing that often gets tossed under the rug alongside with Reconstruction. One of the things that got me back on the horse, outside of like the necessity and the horse's race, I guess in this case, it's fucking weird that I said it that way, but whatever. Nay, was the fact that wasn't simply like, just the parallels, but it's understanding that we had the vision of America that we've talked about. And look, I'm not interested in having these bullshit debates on American imperialism and fucking whether America should exist. Shut the fuck up. If you're still talking whether America should exist, like, okay, no nation said we have got to grow up. And for those who can't, that's fine, but they can stay in daycare, right? We gotta approach this shit differently. But it got me thinking, right? About about economy and how we didn't think about DEI as it pertains to economy and what our response and where that response towards diversity, equity, inclusion comes from in the first place, right? Why is it so easy to mock? And why is it right there? And before it was called DEI, it was called affirmative action. And that was what everybody was. And if you look up those two words, boy, is there a lot of debate and discourse about that. But all of this, the DEI and what if we make this and what if we do that is all about throwing fucking crumbs at a situation that is actually so fucking solvable. I don't think there has been, beyond Indigenous people, a population that can hold and stretch into the future and into the past as much as Black and Indigenous people. And the sensibility that it, encourages. And again, I think this is true in an American context. I think it's true for whoever were the Black and Indigenous people of that particular context, of that particular time. And that's just the thing, right? Although Jewish folks who are extremists like to believe that their experience of genocide was unique, we know for a fact that it's not in the slightest. We don't need to King Leopold and what's happening in Myanmar and and don't forget the Gypsy and the Roma. No, all of that is true. And you'll find that those populations that are treated that way have this long view, but not when they buy into the white sensibility, which is very reactive, very much based in punishment, very singular and linear and inflexible in its thinking because it's not interested in anything but replication. It is very much like cancer, right? It has a cancerous logic, which is replication of self, replication for the growth of replication. Why are they talking about birth rates at a time when people are dying in medical debt because of medical debt? We have a non-existent public education system in America. Why are you talking about birth rates? Yeah, because it's replication. It's growth without logic. It makes no sense. That's actually how many of our Western empires have fallen over time. To be clear, they do generally, but it has to do with decay because there isn't an investment in sort of maintaining all that you've stolen. I love to say conquered, but I don't. I think as intelligent beings, we ought to wonder whether brute force is the sign of intelligence. I thought it was restraint and empathy, but not, again, to those in the Western imagination. So let's go back to DEI. I want to go back. Why? When I think about it, I got that all the time in university. That I or someone else was some kind of proof that racism didn't exist, or proof that we had an easier shot. Right? just to think about this for a second, apply it to the first episode of, is it even Black History Month? We talked about white people wanting absolution, Black people wanting accountability. Let's put that in a scenario. So that's decades or years of this experience. You're walking in butt hurt, and white folks are walking in wanting to be butt hurt because they think they ought to be because of slavery or because of racism. And it's like, neither of these things are useful. We have to approach things differently. To be clear, the accountability and absolution, a much better framing. Okay. So our response to diversity was either something of, no, that's not true, right? Or white women. I brought up Gates for a reason. If we just talk about it like it's science, if we talked about it matter-of-factly, if we talked about it without the need to prove, because they put us in this position over and over again, which is why I came up with those 5 strategies: prove, right? But it's always derailment, reduction, minimization, tokenism, or hurt. These are what's being used, right? Some version of that. And my question is, if we were to approach it similarly and we were to look at other so-called leftists or thinkers who don't care about race, and I think if you're not talking about it consistently, if you're not engaging in any meaningful way consistently, you don't talk to Black people, you don't know any Black people, you have no relationships to most people of color, and if you're a person of color, you don't really know that many Black people, it would be like, I guess, you know what, let me just cut it out and say point blank period, okay? If you are a liberal or a leftist and you don't meaningfully engage with race discourse, the history of American racism, and how it's directly impacting what is happening today, right? As in the question of who gets to be a citizen, it stems from Reconstruction. It was when 4 million enslaved and formerly enslaved Africans who were identifying as Black Americans, as African Americans, if they hadn't done that and fought for that and been the bedrock of all rights, which, by the way, you could classify as race first, to all you class first fucking phonies, anybody trying to approach change, transformation in any meaningful way that is not actively talking about race and is addressing policy with that in mind is at this point about the equivalent of a physicist that is choosing not to use math. Does that make sense? Does it? It doesn't make sense. You're talking about identity politics. Idpol, so quick to use identity politics when it is to shut down a Black person. And it don't matter that she's annoying sometimes, right? You understand identity politics. That is a Black tool that you're using. The Combahee River Collective came up with it. The right took it, punched it up, right? Made it nonsense and propaganda. And then all the white folks are just juggling it, right? Why? What's the point? I think I want a new classification for those folks, but we're going to talk about that in a second. But I can no longer take you seriously. And trust me, I tried to do it the other way. What I am not doing, to be clear, I'm not saying people made an active choice not to. And if we did, then I have empathy and understand it, because I did too. I spent years of my life choosing race, even though I knew it was hard and I knew it was ugly and I knew that gender was safer. And this was, by the way, all the way back in 2014, 2015, right? When the discourse, yaps were really just starting to happen online. And I thought, fuck, it would be so much easier if I just talked about gender, because I saw people choosing that. Actually, Alok was one of those people I saw choosing that. And I saw and I waited. I was like, well, certainly you're going to talk about Black Lives Matter or racial justice. No, it was very much about gender. And it makes sense. Years later, what were we really enthusiastic about? What were we so open? It was about gender, but not as it pertains to women, because that's loaded too. Only as it pertains to trans and non-binary people, even as we watched abortion rights get chopped off the fucking block. So this is actually default, but to know better now, right? To the challenge. So my question is, instead of defending, right, or being defensive, what if we approach things in the way with sincerity? And when people hear sincerity, they hear like, like we have to caretake. No, please be so serious. Please be so serious, okay? I came up with those 5 steps because I knew that when disingenuous conversations were happening, I couldn't abandon the conversation because of the other people in the room and what conclusions they might draw. And it matters because, of course, these conversations about race seem to really, really ingrain themselves onto people's subconscious, conscious, spirit, soul, body, right? Even though you never talk about it. But we're always ready to, right? Our reaction is there. It's almost like there's a parasitic preoccupation at all times, isn't it? Right? Because the second that you bring it up, okay, here we go again. But I came up with those steps because I'm like, these aren't in good faith. But what if those weren't good enough either? Because if sincerity is the engine to fascism, right? Derailment, minimization, reduction, tokenism, hurt, like all of these things, those aren't sincere. So I sort of think, if my tools no longer work because that's a 20th century, what would the 21st century be? And I realized, like, do you want to know why it was an easy reach for Kid Rock to say diversity hire? He said, oh, it's just a diversity, right? He just got brought in because he's black. What if he was? Why is that bad? Why does that say less about a person? That's what we never really asked ourselves. And if we actually addressed it normally, right? Maybe it wouldn't be a fucking joke. Because in a way, there was a tacit acceptance of it, right? Like, well, yeah, but there's got to be true a little bit. And like, honestly, some of you listening might have thought that yourself. I'm certain that at some point in my life, like, I subconsciously had some sort of thought about a dumb woman in a position. Because there's no way I've not internalized misogynist thoughts, but they don't always activate consciously in your mind, which is why you have to consciously talk about it. Because our brains they work so much faster and harder than we do before they turn into just pieces of Lego, which I've seen happen in real time now. Please, God, neuroplasticity is everything. Right? It's observing, it's taking in, and it's making rules and assumptions and biases and all these things, whether we know them or not. So talking is essential. So we don't talk. And then when we do, it's disprove, prove. But what if that's actually okay? Like, let me explain what I mean, because I hear you and you're like, no, because sometimes people need to get punched in the throat. I got you. Hold on. Let me explain. Okay. There are so many things that make life fair and unfair. And again, I'm going to put a knife into the heart of this, and it ties into the race and class thing, okay? But there's so many elements that lead people to any number of rooms. Luck, identity, network, chance, right? Grit, intelligence. Anybody gets into remote time. I'd be most curious if people just said what they meant instead of just sort of, because when it does kind of get brought up, it's almost like, yeah, like affirmative action. That was what I grew up in. There was endless jokes, affirmative action, diversity hire, all that stuff. It was always affirmative action, diversity hire, affirmative action, diversity hire. And that made Black people ashamed. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, oh, we don't have personal pride, whatever. No, it's just being a human being. It's being in a room and knowing that every person in that room believes that you shouldn't be there. That's what that feels like. I have felt that. You're not wanted, that you were given a privilege. You know, it was easier for you. And the irony of that is insane. Right? It's why so many Asian Americans that were anti-affirmative action, which they're learning now. No, you just had internalized anti-Black racism. I don't think they're learning that, to be clear, but I think they're learning their strategy didn't work. But they went after affirmative action thinking that it was Black kids that were stealing their spots. Not once did they ever go after legacies in Ivy League schools. That's the highest percentage of unearned spots taken. And yet, you made it Black people's fault. That was because it was in the zeitgeist. The reason why Kid Rock can go for it so easily is because none of us have done a good enough job, consistently enough, addressing it meaningfully so that it would maybe not be such a joke, right? I include myself. So what if instead of, oh, that's not true, or no, he's not, or no, she isn't, right? Ask, is that what you think? Oh, so-and-so, right? And ask it sincerely. Because not addressing it is like, that's not an option anymore, right? It's just not. I think the proof is everywhere around us. And I think we can say that avoiding things is actually not helping. So what if we said, is that what you think? Is that what you really think? That Jamal doesn't belong here? Oh, no, I'm saying that, or, get them talking, right? It's when I ask comedians and they say, I can't say what I want to say anymore. I'm so frustrated. I ask what you want to say. Then they get all flustered. You could say it. It's your bullshit that you're hiding behind. But with race, there's always this thing. And again, it's the complete lack of accountability is like, well, it's not I'm not saying I, but if you're bringing it into the room, you do. And you might believe it on some level. It would kind of make sense if you did. I remember, now we're going to move a little bit faster and a little bit more into anecdotes. I just really wanted to locate us in that because to me, that feels like we're sitting in the middle of a set of contradictions, right? We've turned race into a joke, but it's also so scary and heavy that we can never talk about it. So we can only talk about it when we're mocking, and we can only talk about it when what? Oh, only really through mockery now. Cool, right? And it makes like humor is a wonderful tool. But again, you have to be smart before you're stupid. That's what makes us different from the other side. They're just stupid and then stupid. We're smart and then we're stupid, but we got a little stupid and it's okay. We just get smart. So I remember, being 14. I'm living, I might have been, I was out there because I just turned 14 because my sister and I were in grade 9. And I can't remember if I was in the women's shelter, the second one, or if I was in the first group home I was in, because it happened in that year. But whatever, it doesn't really matter, right? But I'm running around my little gaggle of girls, and we're little hoodlums, They all look like me, little light brights with big ass hair, and oh boy, did we scrapped, we got into fights and all kinds of stuff. But I remember walking downtown, Toronto, and I come across a native man, an indigenous man. I'd never seen a person I could immediately identify as native before, right? I knew exactly what I was looking at. And he was very obviously homeless and inebriated. And, that silence that sort of falls with young people when something and they don't know what to do with it. And you sort of it gets quiet for a second and then you're goofy and then you're fine again a second later. So that kind of happened. But then one of my friends, again, who was in a, maybe not, in as urgent a situation as me, but I can tell you that all these girls were in public housing, right? All of us got problems at home. One of them says, and we're all the same age, right? She goes, they could get into school for free, right? Like they get into school for free. And we were like, right? And we just kept it moving. And what she was saying was, that him being there is a choice. She's like 14. That's not her fucking thought. Do you get what I'm saying? At a certain point, we have to acknowledge that there are certain thoughts and beliefs that are not your own, that are in your body. But in not confronting them, they become your own. They become yours. If you're not in critical engagement with the things that we believe, right? Or the way that we feel about things, sincerely, right? Not scrolling, but actually, how do I feel about this? What do I think about this? Every time I read something, I got to stop and I got to think about my thoughts on the things and what I like or what I didn't like, right? That kind of shit. It stays, which is why in a Black sensibility, we believe in satire, right? But I'm going to ask you, we made fun of it. We made fun of the diversity thing because it seemed like we weren't thinking about the real economic implications. How it would devastate generations of Black Americans, generate devastations of poor Americans, many of whom are not Black. The people who don't get the chance, because bias, as I want to remind you, does not operate in, I don't like those people. I'm scared of the Blacks, right? What it mostly operates as is, this, I feel good over here. This, I feel good about this. I know this. Oh, this person reminds me of me. And, oh, I know that. Oh man, you like that band? Da, da, da. It's usually through that. And it's about wanting to pour favor and benefit on the things that, because there's this narcissistic bullshit, but also race. Scary. You could turn on me any second. So rather than go for the jugular or attack or like, oh, throw my, this guy, how are we ever going to know how people genuinely feel or think? I want to be clear. The thoughts were ugly. The sensibility was white. The conclusions were silly, right? Oh, women are just liars. Like that's the direct implication. But the truth is, I gained more out of engaging than not. And am I going to hold this person accountable for misogynist thoughts, or am I going to look at what is creating the misogynist thoughts and what a counterculture looks like? Right? I like to be where I'm useful, but I'm also not going to allow something to be said without some kind of conversation if I think that it is damaging or wrong or, but going from the place of sincerity doesn't mean being a bitch nigga. You know what I mean? Like, I really want y'all to hear things well. What is that thing that all, it was like, it's the Filipino version of white boys, John 3:16. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. Every Filipino boy I knew playing ball would come in with a fucking long tee saying, don't mistake kindness. I loved it. But no, it's like, sincerity doesn't mean being a bitch nigga. It actually what it does is it strips people's ability to react to something. Now we're moving on from Rock because, I don't think he's a bad actor, in a real sense. Like, it does nothing. He is expressing a belief that most people do. I'd rather people tell me what they actually feel, which you can create the space for if you're not constantly personalizing it, which is unfortunately how we do. Personalize it. This is how this makes me feel. I don't care about how I feel about things when I'm present for somebody else, because to me, it's an experiment. Also, I'm learning. And I'm not internalizing what this person is saying. It doesn't at all impact my worldview. In fact, I want to use this, but I need the honesty, right? But in the sincerity and not giving somebody something to react against, they respond more honestly, including saying the stupid thing that they believe or saying the stupid racist thought that they have. You're asking somebody to own it. They have no choice but to either double down or backtrack. And in a way, a little bit of a bear trap, but it's actually not. Or perhaps it's more of one than what we think we are when we're playing these fun little rhetorical devices or games. But all of it, when I think about it, everything that our whole approach now is like, I don't want to get hurt. Don't hurt me. I'm like, all right. We're not veal. It's okay to take some knocks. But take them for the right reasons. we're taking knocks now on every fucking level because we have simply refused to build power. When did we stop trying to build power? When we stopped engaging with race. How are you talking about immigration and getting ICE out of the fucking streets and not talking about race while people are literally being picked up and disappeared for their skin color? A white sensibility is like, I don't want to see it. Get ICE off the street. A black sensibility is, we're going after the detention centers. We're not going to allow for the expansion of them. Wire just put out a whole new article telling us where, and I hit up a few folks and I was like, there's one that they're trying to build out in Irvine here in California. Well, great. I need to find out what the contracts are, who's being contracted to build it, where it's going. Where we have shut down, we have stopped jails, juvenile jails from being built to reform LA here. Even Van Jones had his day, his shut down a kid prison back in the day, right? We actually have. These are just the two examples I can think of off the top. This is just they're all there because it's about it's about shoring up and protecting and making safe as many people as possible while you're working to build up power. The reason why Black Americans have been inconsistently able to build up power is because it depends on to what extent white apathetic actors and white bad actors work together, often harmoniously, to delegitimize and or to dismember Black people themselves or their rights. And sometimes there isn't a really good reason because the reason is racism. And that sucks. That's just ugly. You know, I want to go back again to that place. Think about the affirmative action thing, right? Because I feel like that is a way that we can go into a feeling state when it comes to race that doesn't make you want to, throw yourself over, and we got to build up the muscle a little bit. But if you're being honest with yourself, there's a thought that you've had in your head, right? Oh, and again, go back to Rock. I don't believe that Rock is just some hardcore misogynist. I don't have proof of that. But all I know is that was a logical conclusion from the society that we live in. I'm not going to hold him accountable to that thought. I'm going to look at society though and say, what are the conditions that are creating it? Even while I make up my own mind about how I look at this person because of it, I'm still not going to hold that person accountable. Again, you have to be in relationship to somebody to do it. You have to be part of that work. I just needed to make sure that some dumb shit wasn't said at a table and that be the end of it. But we're not doing a great job. Like, this is a funny example of us not doing a good job. Like we all knew Amanda Gorman's poetry was garbage. Did we not all know? And it was okay when she was a kid. Okay. I want to be clear. Like, it was bad when she was a kid, but it's okay. And Trump is coming and a little black girl, reading a poem is nice. But we knew that poem wasn't good. You think Phyllis Wheatley would be okay with that? Lord, June Jordan, Hughes, Angelou. And then, because we didn't say anything, she's still writing poetry. Why didn't we say that her poetry was bad? Because she's black. That's one of those moments where it's like, by the way, I'm not saying go after the next bad black girl poet, but I'm just saying, we couldn't even joke about it, you guys. And it was funny. Okay, at least now we're being a little bit more honest, but it's because we hate black people. like not because we're doing a better job dealing with race. Oh my God. Okay, we gotta switch it up a little bit. We gotta switch it up a little bit. Okay, I wanna take us into a different thought state. So in this, we talked a little bit about black sensibility, but I want to tell you how, because it's not, class doesn't matter, but I want you to think about how, right? Again, race and class, why are they significant? Why do I keep saying this? We need to care about these things because these are the systems that decide outcomes most regularly, most consistently, and have the longest, ugliest shadows. Okay. So I don't need to go to new. I can go to old. Okay, so we talk about poverty, and y'all heard. So you've heard me say a couple of times. I can be off-putting for people. I'm like, don't get me. I'm very loved, but I get why. I am the person that's just like, why are you talking about being poor? And you're, growing up poor, and you're 48, and we're all in this funder meeting, we're supposed to be pitching what we believe to be the next important movement. And every third person, it's actually not true. It was back to back to back. Like it was a thing. But you say that you're poor, you grew up poor. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Right? What does that have to do with anything about this room right now? But it's about me and I, which I'll pick up in a second. But I want you to think about poverty differently. I want you to think about it in racial terms. And that doesn't mean only for like Black folks. I want you to think of it understanding with the weight of history, right? And we haven't even gone through it in depth, but now we're feeling something, right? There's a sense of time and place that we haven't been able to find on the internet. There's a kind of grappling with knowledge, a picking up of where we left off, an expanding, an experiment. We're literally troubleshooting this together. And I personally believe that we're perhaps coming up with a new lexicon, right? So poverty is one of those words that we say poor more than we talk about poverty. Poverty is systemic, right? But I want you to think about this. Because at the moment, I'm like, if I approach race completely from an uncomfortable place for me, like just out of the woodwork. So I brought this up earlier, but we didn't get into it. Is our society functioning at optimal levels? Right. I'm like, that's a dumbass question. I'm like, what a dumb, but I'm approaching it because it's about experimentation. Okay. But that led me to Gladwell's 2008 book, but then that led me to something else, Terman, right? In 1921. Because we have to talk about what makes success possible, or what determines outcomes, right? Okay. Trying to approach this in a very open way. So in 1921, Dr. Lewis Terman, okay, he's a Stanford University psychologist. And this is a guy that pioneered the IQ test, right? And one of the first things that comes back, and it's parallel between then and now, is also race science, right? There is a genuine belief that Black people are inferior, are less intelligent, and less deserving. The truth is, the vast majority of people in the West believe this on some level, largely subconsciously, right? But if you don't address it, it starts to inform your actions. I did not address the pain and disappointment and disillusionment I felt regarding Black Lives Matter for a really long time. I now understand that led to me not wanting to engage with race in the same way, because it was too layered and nuanced, and I just didn't want to be hurt again. Well, we're getting hurt anyway. I'm not dead. This stuff still really matters. I'm going to keep doing it. Right? So, one of the things that we think about, and again, we're talking about affirmative action in schools, DEI, all that shit, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So here comes this guy, and he puts this IQ test, and in this race science thing, it comes back. It was actually invented as a cultural body of work post-Reconstruction as a result of Black people actualizing as citizens and having the same rights. And they're like, you're not equal to me, because that's the truth. The pro-slavery and the anti-slavery coalition only disagreed on slavery itself. Where they agreed was that Black people were not equal. In fact, the only thing that made Lincoln change his mind was having a long-standing relationship with Frederick Douglass, like the intimacy of their relationship, which means that he was surprised by Douglass's intelligence. I have only experienced people being surprised at my intelligence. I no longer am interested in differentiating where it comes from, because at this point I have so much personal power that I know that people are just talking about if they're applauding it, they're just like, whoa, because I nullify the nonsense. But before my aura did that work, it was mostly like, oh, wow. And then what was that thing you're so articulate. You're so articulate. And now those people are too afraid to talk to me, but because aura. But IQ has been a metric, right? Hasn't it come up a lot? And it's baked in, right? Whether or not we are honest about it, the reason why Crockett is so easy to make fun of is because she sounds fucking stupid most of the time. But it's not a stretch, right? Because it's historic caricature, right? The way that she talks, but she's not strategic because she's black. She's just not strategic because she's Jasmine Crockett, right? But to assume that we're all just not looking like we're just like, yeah, but this has nothing to do with race. Paul, but has nothing to do with race. You're a liar. And the truth is, it is a choice to meaningfully engage in liberation rhetoric, primarily derived from the Black American lexicon, the Black American experience, the Black American tradition, the Black American aesthetic, the Black American blueprint, the bedrock upon which all of our rights as like fucking Thomas Jeffersons. That's all of it. They didn't even allow immigrants into the country until after, like in any meaningful way. It was the legislation of 65. 1965. That created a new precedent for immigrants to come in who weren't white, who didn't have all the money in the world, right? Whatever. You know what? Let me not get into that. But if we were being more honest, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, I'm no longer, because again, I'm waking up, right? It's not a coincidence that these massive and major left-leaning platforms and streamers and pundits, they don't talk to black people. They don't have any meaningful relationship to black people. They don't talk about race meaningfully, even though they'll use the terms that black folks can, especially the queers. I'm going to say even the queers. The queers were like intersectionality, but we not crossing that street. I don't want to go into that neighborhood. I don't want to talk about that stuff. And then come to resent you for the same rules that you made up. Anywho, at a certain point, we have to address the fact that it's not simply, oh, this is too hard, or I just don't know. It's a choice. On some level, people look at black people as a liability. Either it's because of intelligence, or you're going to use race on me. You're going to do this and that. Isn't like, I don't get that. That sounds really stupid to me, because if we're looking at who has been the most effective manipulators in this country, they don't look like black people at all. It's the contradiction of being afraid of but never fearful of. You're afraid of what black people, the problem that black people can present in your life, but you're not fearful of black upset, black rage, black disappointment, black disillusionment, because what the fuck do you care? You have no relationship to blackness whatsoever. That's a problem. I don't know what it is, but it's the kind of people who are like, I care about class and I'm a good person, and and it's class first and whatever. And I've annihilated that fucking thing, and I'll keep annihilating it. I'm about to really fucking put a hole in it with this psychology thing. But I just wanted to name before we wrap that I don't know if it's almost like personality politics or persona politics, like the people who hide behind the personality or the persona of themselves. It's mostly white people, and then leverage that to negate the responsibility and to simply talk about or think about and engage with race meaningfully. You're a charlatan. Like at some point, it's not. We used to call that liberal, but now it's spread. Liberalism has spread so far across the board that they're all talking about hill politics. All of them, mostly, almost exclusively, have no grasp of culture. But even in talking about hill politics, Nothing about race, even though that's the most racially charged site. What is that? Like, what do you even get that? Anyway, whatever. Let me go back to this test, okay? So this psychologist, like, he's the guy who pioneered the IQ test, and so he scored. And I'll wrap here because I know we've been a little bit all over the place, but you're with me while I'm trying. I'm trying to unpack and unravel, and I'm sharing things as I go. Okay. So 1921, Terman. In fact, Terman. That's I think there's a building or something named Terman in Stanford. It wasn't named after him specifically. I think it was named after his son, but because they have longstanding work in Stanford, right? So Terman, legacy. Okay, sorry. Stanford psychologist who comes up with the IQ test because he was like, okay, I want to know what the predictors of success are, and they, you know, back then especially, and I mean, even now, IQ, right? IQ is so important. IQ is so important. So Terman does this thing, and he chooses 1,500 California-based schools. So they put out a test. They want to identify. They did this test for a bunch of kids, but they wanted to identify 1,500 children who scored 135 or over, right, on his new intelligence test. That's the Stanford Bennett, right? So to be clear, 135, 140, we're talking like genius, right? We're talking about smart. Don't worry, babies. There's book smart. There's street smart. Don't worry about it. We know it's not everything, but it's pretty significant. Okay? Because what was found in this dispelled all the bullshit that we have around it. But we don't often get that story, do we? Right? Okay. So he gives an IQ test to 250,000 California children, right? Looking for 140 plus. Now, there's an article in the New York Times that was written in 1995 or 6 that covers this. You can also find more about it in Gladwell's book. I haven't read it because I'm not interested in it as of this moment, but I do know that he brought it up because he referenced this in a YouTube video that I watched. I think he did it in 2008, but he did it in I watched it in 2010, something like that, right? It was like 2010 or 2011. And I didn't really, because, you know, I like to collect information or whatever, but this is the thing. The idea behind the IQ test, right? What is like, we love, like, white people are like, this is it, is like, if we could confirm that IQ can supersede all of society's failures, that IQ can supersede, you know, the nature versus nurture, what kind of school you were in, right? That was the hope. And for the purpose of this experiment, we're like, great. The only thought in our head, our only political analysis right now for the purpose of this experiment is, right? What would give us the best, most, a society, what determinants and what things will give us the most, how do I want to say this? I got it. That would enable us to reach our highest human potential as a society, right? Like, what things can we identify to do that? Obviously, IQ is going to be one of them. So white mind, white for everything else, okay? So he was like, let's figure it out. I bet you it's the geniuses. So I made this IQ test. We're going to find little baby geniuses. And then we're going to follow them for 20 to 30 years. When do we get that anymore, right? When do we get that? In Boyhood, in that movie? That's about it. So we're going to follow it. I'm going to follow them for 20 and 30 years. Because his prediction was, because again, I think like 140 something is, I don't even, fucking high, right? I don't know much about this shit, but it's high. And like rare, okay? Rare, especially in school children. Rare. But these things tend to present themselves early. So what he discovered, so he finds about 1,500 of them, and then they have, I'm going to reference the article particularly. Terman's little geniuses, who as the study went on, took to calling themselves termites, okay, that's actually fucking adorable, are now in their 80s. This was in 95, so we can assume that they're gone. Oops. smart people died. Okay, whatever. And have been, we'll mourn them later, and have been contacted by researchers every 5 to 10 years. So every 5 to 10 years, so they're followed for 20 to 30, but every 5 to 10 years, they're being talked to, right? So the term and study of genius, that's the grandfather of all lifespan research. Okay? So IQ can supersede all, right? Because that's what we love. We love to be like, mutual aid. We can mutual aid our way out of this. We can purchase justice our way out of this. If I just support this person's show, then I did the work, right? And that's okay. It makes sense. We're going to go to what we can control. That's what feels manageable for our brains, okay? Blah, blah, blah. So what his hypothesis was that these geniuses were going to make up all the top level politicians, the top scientists, the most famous people, that they would live unbelievably successful lives because their IQ can supersede all things. So what they discovered was that this group of youth turned adults had extremely different, strikingly different fates. Okay? The top, right? The top of the intellectuals, the top 15%, they did end up occupying, like, high level, like again, we're using capitalistic measures of success, right? That's why the mind wipe is so important. So when you look at someone and you're determining like their trajectory based on IQ, you're like, what's going to stop this person? This person's going to win a Nobel. This person's going to be at a high, is going to be a senator. The person's going to, work in this massive law firm that shapes foreign policy, right? This person's going to be all these things big and impressive. And yeah. So 15% of them did that. So what happened to the rest? We go on. So those top 15 did. The majority in the middle experienced pretty regular lives, right? Like moderately successful, right? Normal professional lives, middle management, all that stuff, okay? Again, not what you think. A chunk, though, at the bottom were considered failures by every success model metric, okay? They did not realize in any way their very rare human potential, right? According to this. So what he did was like, no, okay, hold on a second. We have to figure out why. Like, what they had the same intelligence. What the fuck? What happened? So he's like, it's something in their personality. So they start to run through their data. Nope, not the personalities. Okay, cool. Well, it's got to be in their habits. The answer has got to be simple. Like, these folks were just lazier. That's it. They're just lazier, right? Like their personality's flawed, all those kinds of things, right? Their habits are flawed, whatever. Nope. The answer was simple. The genius level kids the top 15% who all became, realized their potential according to this metrics of success, right? Which does matter. It's what white people in the West often take for granted, which is why, the not naming of a Black middle class and how integral it is to the survival of Black people, is quite disturbing. In addition to why, like, social welfare nets only really exist not only because Black people fought for them, but because they were required after rights and personhood and land and life was stolen from Black Americans. I really want to be clear about that. We lived in the potential for a different America for 10 fucking years almost. And it was different. We wouldn't have this bullshit. We also wouldn't have the kinds of wealth disparities that we do, to be honest with you, because that's not really the same ethos that existed where Black freed people said that the only way that they'd fight to maintain their freedom was if those people that look like them, even the ones who didn't, would also be guaranteed not just their freedom, but the exact same rights, no matter where they lived. That ethos has been true this entire time. There is no fucking way we would be living in the same kind of country. That's why they've done all of this. That's why Homeland has done all of this. Worked tirelessly, endlessly, because on some level, we're not willing to admit it. We all have internalized, and we all on some level believe that you must have cheated. That was the treatment of Patrice. Patrice failed as a fucking leader on several levels, of which I will go in depth on one day. None of them justifies the racist abuse. But what was used? What was used? Class. Let's go back to this. What was the class, right? Money was used. Money was used against Patrice, right? That she stole. And meanwhile, we know if the IRS had found even a fucking iota of shady maneuverings, they'd be so far up her asshole, they'd be coming out her nose. We know that. There was the accusations, but did you ever see any proof? Was she ever charged with anything? No, because there was nothing there. But the racism, again, it came, but it was because they looked at her and said, you had to have cheated. You had to have cheated. There's no way that somebody who looks like, but it had to do with the fact that she was Black American. The truth is, if it was me and our roles were reversed, you probably wouldn't be able to sell that story. Not just because, not because I'm not Black American. That's part of it, but because of the way I look. I don't come with all the historical baggage. I come from Canada. So if I'm foreign, it's okay. I want to be clear though. Only up to a point, right? So the ones who did best came from wealthy households. The ones who didn't actualize at all, the people who were at the bottom, right? They're geniuses. They're at the very bottom. They came from poor families. That was the only thing that was verifiably, irrefutably, statistically true. The people who did well and realized their quote unquote potential, right? They're all geniuses by any standard of the imagination, by any metric. But only the ones who achieved the top, were in the top 15% who quote, realized their potential. They all came from wealthy households. Guaranteed the ones in the bottom, every single one of them came from poor families. Their parents were not in college. Or, hadn't attended college. They had no cultural or institutional support around them. No books, all that shit, right? So I want to be clear. Let me be really clear. Even if a child who has a brain, has been gifted a brain that thinks in a particular way that is one in like a billion, right? That does not ensure the success of that child. Environment, access to resources, money, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter. Like this to me was so indicative of not simply, because again, you think, oh wait, a simple bitch might think, wait, but this kind of supports the whole class thing first, doesn't it? Really? You'd think that, right? But again, class is integral. Class is money. Why does race continue? Why does racism just continue and thrive? And I'll end here because I'm actually going on too long for this episode. But this is a very important point I need to make, okay? Racism exists in the way that it does today. It is an institution. It is a belief system. It's disappeared. It is the bedrock and the foundation of how we understand things in America, right? But that there's a financial component. There's a financial incentive to maintain racism. Look at how the billionaires are using race and gender in this case, because for the 5 minutes that white trans people from Ivy League institutions bled into 25 minutes. That felt like 25 years. Remember, the only crime is annoying and also just being, honestly, just useless. Because they have a white sensibility. There was nothing about power. It was all about what attention I can get, what's happening to me, how I feel about this, and feelings became facts. But anyway. Preoccupation with pronouns, nothing to do with policy, right? Black sensibilities. Oh, you're a cunt, but because you want to talk your shit, you want to It's not bullying, but maybe you're not respecting me properly. Cool. I'm going to make sure I get your ass in a different way. Every time we say, we can't just go open our phones and talk about it because most of the time you're not believed anyway. I don't know who the Gen Z is that's always talking about this shit sometimes, but it's like the way that racism is often talked about is not meaningful. Even when people are referencing their own experiences, and a lot of time the experiences are starting to sound more and more like when trans people are talking about pronouns, which I'm like, I don't think this is the transphobia you were looking for, babe. Sounds like you just had an interaction with a person that didn't get you. Sounds like that's actually what most of us go through. Anyway, why this is so fucking important is put this through the lens of race now. So we know that a poor child is almost guaranteed to not succeed no matter what their IQ is. Now imagine that as a poor Black child. How slim that margin is. And when it's presumed that you're not intelligent to begin with. When a 5-year-old makes a grown adult uncomfortable simply because they're Black. It's weird, isn't it? And then it's weird to not even talk about it. You can't be class first in America. It just doesn't work. That's why everything that they keep trying to do fucking fails, because you keep thinking, and I tried it. I was like, if there's some way I don't have to go back to that sad place and that bad place. But it wasn't sad or bad at all, actually. It is a reality that there was not enough infrastructure of us around. And because on some level, it is almost impossible actually, fascinatingly enough, at the highest level, it's almost impossible not to take it personally, because you're just like, we felt a very similar jubilee when we first started. It was like, well, people don't know, but once they know what we know, they will change. How could you not want to? But then nobody did. Nobody wanted to, because that's how these things work. But the reason why they maintain is because there's a profit motive. There's a profit incentive. There is a massive profit incentive to maintaining racism. But the question of what the chicken or the egg, who fucking cares, right? This isn't a hypothetical. It's actually just what happened. Black people created wealth in this country through the stolen personhood and labor. And then that exploitation continued every year after that, and compounded and then compounded and compounded, and every decade after that, after already having built up 450 some odd years of wealth for a very specific subset of people in America. And even if your legacies and generations back don't come from that, which is totally fine, on some level, that system has afforded more benefit. That doesn't mean less struggle, but it means there's certain struggles you never have to deal with. But again, apply this through the lens of race. We know that poor intelligence, but what's the expectation of Black people? Well, you have to be better than everybody else. And then even when you're in rooms with people who maybe had to go through significantly less, right? They went through their own stuff, but they had to go through less, jump through less hoops, get to where you are, to only look at you and then to think, well, you got a free pass. When has anything ever been free for Black people? Let's go back to that thing that happened when I'm 14, and a friend of mine who looks exactly like me, who comes from disenfranchisement, says about a homeless Indigenous man, right? We don't have any Native friends. We don't know anybody, right? It would be years before I was like 19 or 20 before I intentionally went out to Six Nations territory, right? Oh, well, they could have gone to school for free. So, as if him being there was a choice. That's what you can do when you don't understand race, when you don't understand history. That's what children do. It's our job to teach children better. So now our movement is being run by children, people who refuse, again, physician, wait, what do you call a physics expert?
Physicist.
Thank you. I was like, thank you, Corey. Do you know, I wanted to say physician so bad, y'all. And I was like, fuck, I know that's not the right one. A physicist. It would be like a physicist that doesn't understand math. It's just very stupid. And that's the way that we need to treat it. Not judgmental, not disgust, not moral soapboxing. It's just childish. It's very silly. And that's how we ought to treat it. A little bit of sincerity goes a long way with kids. Mockery hurts their feelings. It's mean. But sincerity, well, children really open up. Hey, do you really believe? Is that what you really believe? At the very least, it forces them to own it. And whatever it gives you, it's going to be 1,000 times better than what you were going to get with what our old tools were. Anyway, I've talked way too much. I hope this one was useful. I really knew I was going out there with this. And there's a few things more that I thought I would have time to say. Because I'm just going through my notes and I'm like, you was really on one. But you're with me, right? Like in the framing of the Black sensibility, again, we're going to keep mixing things up, but I will try to do a better job of like always sandwiching things within like facts and theoretical, theory-based arguments, which is why I like to bring up data. But our application is going to be avant-garde. It's going to be exploratory because, well, how we're doing it isn't working. I'm not interested in shaming or blaming anyone. I think that's a waste of time. And I believe that we all kind of suck at this. And I'm no exception. I ran for a while. And it makes sense. I mean, my heart was broken in a million fucking places and I lost every close friend I had. I still have trust issues from that time. Because the people who hurt me the worst weren't the Caucasians. They were people who look like me. But through a Black sensibility, I'm like, yeah. Because it's about understanding the duality and what decisions are made around survival that are sometimes wrongly applied. But when people have been through hardship, they're going to do that sometimes, right? The sense of safety for self is outsized. And that's what I've discovered most with people with a white sensibility. The need to be comfortable and for that to be a priority, the need for prioritization of self and self needs is paramount in a white sensibility. And when you live in a house with your family, in a Black family, when you live in a house in a Latino family, oh, everybody's needs is getting met. Because everybody knows what they are. Right away. Anyway. I think that's that. So leave with two things. Only leave with two things. How we approach and think about diversity and equity inclusion and how we made fun of it and how we honestly took for granted affirmative action and stopped looking at it as what every Black person that came before us called it, which is a Band-Aid solution. Not only, but you get the insult. Like I've never understood insult to injury so much in my life. The rights are given and applied accurately. Then they're taken and then not applied. So it's neo-slavery. Then you go through plantation politics, the Jim Crow era, having to have another fight for civil rights in a country that you've lived in generationally about 6 to 8 times now. And then knowing that people that are part of your family and your history had seen those rights taken, given, which by the way, not fought for, fought for, but for the purpose of my framing, right? Like they had these rights, then have it stolen back after the inhumane, hideous reality of chattel slavery, to then have the insult of a Band-Aid solution that isn't even applied evenly, like affirmative action. In this case, it is significant that white women benefited statistically more from it, but then to be mocked for the very thing that is the only thing, the joke is the only thing that was offered. And it wasn't even offered. You fought so fucking hard for it. And the best that they were going to give you was sometimes, occasionally, one of you will get in. The best one, the least offensive one. and then you have to be better than everybody else, and then you're fucking humiliated every second that you're there because some asshole has internalized a bullshit story about you. But why the talking is so important is these things only really fall apart when they're articulated out loud. And you ask somebody, is that what you really think? Do you really buy into it? And then it just fucking evaporates. Or that thin version of a human being kind of does. And they get to choose whether or not they're going to find out a basis for realizing as a human. But the only way is when we say these things. So anyway, I love you all very much. I'm glad you stuck it out with me. And we're trying something. And the only reason I'm willing to try this whole approach of exploration is because I'm like, if I treated the social sciences, this reality, as if it were science, I would probably be much more reverent of the people around me. And I wouldn't be able to just pick and choose what I applied or what I didn't apply. Right? I'm going to be a physicist and I'm going to think about mass and space, but I'm not going to ever use E equals MC squared. The Negro problem is the Negro solution. It is the anti-Black racism equation. If you can't equate that, you're never going to get any liberation for anybody in this country. But that what you really want, or just want to talk about it? I think for a lot of people, that's true. Either way, we have our work to do. I love you all very much. Thank you, Corey, for making us look good, sound good. Thank you to each and every one of you that's honestly giving me this space to work through some of these things. Because I do think that this is foundational to something. And when I say I do think this is foundational to something, you should know that I'm quite serious about it. And at the very least, I don't forget things. So I don't tend to. Love you all very much. I can't wait for the next episode of Dark Woke. Talk your shit, make your shit, you're the shit. Love you.